the SM Media Podcast Network.
Hi folks, and welcome to the first episode of the Celtic Report for season 2025-26. I'm Scott McPike. It's always a pleasure to be your host as always. And we're going to take a look at some fascinating things over the summer. And the first game of the new season, Flag Day, didn't turn out to be all that up to much, but we'll get into it over the course of the show. To join me to look back on what has been a fascinating summer and not a great first game, it's a pleasure to welcome Stuart Ross.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure. When we set this up and we were going to get this started, we were like, oh, Celtic win 4-0 on Flag Day, that's what happens. Didn't turn out that way.
No, it was a bit of a tough watch, but I think just happy to get the win in the end. I think it wasn't great, but maybe with just how everyone's feeling in terms of the transfer window and things like that, maybe exacerbated a wee bit. St Mirren are a good team, proven that for the last few seasons, especially in the top six. They've, run Celtic close a good few times over the last few years. We've seen that game plenty, especially last couple of seasons in terms of just a wee bit slow, taking a wee bit of time to get into rhythm, add in new players coming in, add in a few positions where we're looking desperate short of that quality. It was kind of predictable, but yeah, let's say I think just happy to get that one in the end, and then hopefully it's just that things will start moving in terms of off the pitch, in terms of bringing some guys in to help, and also I think you'll see a bit more. I think there's a bit more to come from even the players that have brought in as well.
I think there's a weird mix on Sunday because it was obviously Flag Day. People were excited. People are fed up over the summer. Do you know what I mean? You're just wanting to get that football started. There was obviously a bit of sadness in the air with the passing of John Clark and John Fallon. Paul McStaben there. I don't think that was coincidental with perhaps some of the maybe unrest with some of the support. I think that was with Fergus McCann was sitting in the director's box as well. I don't think if you're looking for two figures at the club who can install a bit of happiness and goodwill, McStay McCann are probably up there. And it was just a weird feeling because, let's be honest, a lot of the fans, and I'm very much looking at this from the outside, there's a bit of discontent. I think that's pretty obvious based on some of the kind of mood music you hear talking to fans, talking to people who cover the club. But I mean, you look at the team in terms of pre-season, the business. First of all, before we get into players coming in, I wanted to talk about one that went out. Celtic's transfer model over the past, 15, 20 years has been remarkable. And Nicholas Kuhn is another example of that. I think one of the most interesting bits of business Celtic have done, because can we make a case that he was okay for 6 months, incredible for another 6 months, and then pretty flat for the rest?
Yeah, probably that's 6 months in between the 6 months of last season. But I think he is the kind of template. It's 18 months seems pretty quick, but that is modern football. If you can buy somebody for 2-3 million and flip them for 17 or something,
15,
in 18 months, that's fine. I think where the frustration comes for Celtic fans is we don't always seem to be. We've done this. The club have done that for a long while. Like I said, been successful to a degree, but it's not really looking like they're joined up in terms of right. Well, where's the next one coming from?
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be a wee bit slow to react to things. I think that was evident with Kyogo going in January, even though Rodgers said at the time we knew he wanted to go. So there you've got 6 months to do that in January to get another centre forward. Then didn't happen. You're now looking at first game of the season done already. That position doesn't look like it's been strengthened and brought in. Yamada there, but it's a bit of an unknown. He's one of those project ones who get in, see how he gets on. But there's been no significant investment in that position still, and still got a month to go. But I think that's where the frustration comes from. Same with Could. I think we've not seen any kind of, we've seen links with wingers, but probably ones that were on the list before, like Barakwisha,
I was
things
going
like
to bring
that.
that up. Yeah,
And they're more left-sided as well, so I've not seen anyone that seems naturally right-sided. So, I know you can always bring in somebody on the left and move my head over to the right. Jota obviously will be fit, but I think you're talking the start of next season, so start of next year. So there has to be a bit of, whether even short term, if it's a loan for an extra wide player. That surely the club have known that for a long time now as well. And again, doesn't seem to be a huge amount of urgency. But again, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But it's just, I think, given Rodgers' comments on Friday, I think kind of clear that it's not moving quick enough.
Brendan Rodgers
He's not being presented with the kind of quality. I think he's happy to take these guys in at the start of the window who can work with in terms of young players like demeanour, or not young, but potentially project players, a mix of young players like Osmond, guys like Ross doing to fill squads. There has been quite a bit of kind of squad management going on. It's just this next bit is then right. Well, we still need some of these areas filled, and we need quality. And whether that is he's not being presented to the right players or whatever, we don't know.
There's two names I want to bring up who seem to have been linked with Celtic since about 2003, and that was Matthias Fitzgarden and Mikael Ange Balikwisha. Now, the former has moved on to Norwich, and it felt as if he was dead. It has to have been linked. It wasn't just a case of a link from a newspaper. There had to have been some sort of movement. But I was very fascinated with how that his move to Norwich came about, because it was no secret, and it still isn't a secret, that Norwich are expecting a bid for Josh Sargent, the American striker. And Norwich went and got Fitzgarden quite early in the window with the kind of view to replace Sargent with Fitzgarden. If Celtic wanted Fitzgarden, why did they not just go and get him? Because I'm not saying like Celtic can go and spend the £9 million that we think Fitzgarden went to Norwich for. I don't know if Brendan Rodgers wanted him, because I was very fascinated with that club signing thing that we'll get into. It just feels as if Celtic have links with these players, spend about 2 years trying to get many bids in, and before you know it, they go to a better club, or not a better club, but a club that can just do the business really quickly. Balikwisha seems to be kind of moving towards France, but I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of goes all the way. It just feels as if Celtic have these players in mind, and for some reason, I'm not going to say penny pinching, because I don't know if that's the case, but it feels as if they don't push the button.
Yeah, I don't know if there's merit in holding off. If there's still this mentality of we'll wait until we're guaranteed Champions League football before we push the button on some of these higher end.
I don't get that though, especially if you're ever qualifier. I don't understand.
Yeah, but the guys you're talking about, Fitzgarden, Barakwisha, if he does wherever he goes, and it seems like he'll go to somebody at some point, I think he's going to last year's deal.
Yes,
I don't imagine that's a massively difficult deal to do. It's a £4 or £5 million player. It's not going to make a huge dent, I don't think. But again, there seems to be this hesitancy of, well, we can hold off and maybe we get a better deal, or we'll make sure we've got Champions League, we're totally secure. That like I say, I don't understand that either, because there's enough there to, or is it there's chat that some people feeling that, well, we spent a lot of money on Ida last season, spent a lot of money on Arne Engels, not going to do that every summer. Have we got a return on those guys? The jury's out on both of them, potentially. So yeah, I just nobody really knows, I suppose, is this. So, but I think what's clear from what I say from Friday is there's a bit of a disconnect there between Rodgers and the board, and what the kind of why deals aren't being done. Because it sounds like Rodgers would want deals done if there's been players there that he wanted it. So it's maybe they've not got them done rather than he's been presented. Because I don't like to say I think these are all. I think some of the signings going back a couple of years were certainly questionable, but I think that it's maybe not so much the talent ID, it's maybe it's the execution of these deals. That's when it gets down to making the deal happen. That's when things are hitting the wall.
And like, I don't think it's like the day it was under Matt Law, where it was very much he was making the decisions, right? I think Paul Tisdale was a bit more connected with Rodgers than maybe Law was, and I think we know that was a bit of a nepotism hire, right? I don't think that's, well, obviously it was, but it just feels to me as if there's a wee bit of a disconnect. And Brendan Rodgers said when he came back he'll be here for 3 years. It doesn't look like he's going to be there beyond that.
No, I suppose unless he's obviously set his stall out now to say, it's it's on the board now to come up with the quality that he thinks that's needed, that the fans know is needed, and certainly a few positions to make that next step in Europe. Or he's talked about. I mean, maintaining in Europe would probably still be success for Celtic in terms of getting out of that, getting into it to start with.
Yeah.
The draw today is probably reasonably favourable.
I'd rather go to Slovakia than Kazakhstan.
Obviously, yeah. But I think in terms of you'd be pretty even with the squad just now, I suppose you probably worry a wee bit, but you'd hope there's a wee bit, at least a couple in the next week or two that are going to add something coming in. Might not be able to make a huge impact on those ties, but like I say, getting in, being competitive in the league stages and getting into that kind of playoff kind of spot that they got last season would, I think, that'd still be success. And domestically too, I think, there's a lot of unknowns this season in terms of Rangers and Martin, perhaps with the investment there, with the Tony Bloom thing. So there's going to be challenges domestically as well. Certainly with a squad the way it is just now, there would be. So I think depending on what at the moment, I don't think it's likely that he stays beyond the end of the season, unless there's kind of significant quality brought in and he feels. I don't know where his next move would be. So I think if the board can convince him in terms of the actions rather than words in the next few weeks, then there maybe is a chance. I was always kind of wary about, it's like a player to some extent. I know he said himself it's different, but it's still not massively common to have a manager going into the last year of his contract without. It doesn't sound like there's been anything put on the table and he's holding off. It doesn't even sound like they've got to that stage. So that seems a wee bit, you can obviously read that one way. So, and then because you then look at it the other way, the board, do they want to, push the button on a lot of players and spend a lot of money, players that are backed by a manager if he's not going to be here in 12 months. So you do see it from there, but it's up to them to come up with a solution that's in the best interest of the club and not, individuals.
And like pre-season as a whole, like there were some takeaways, like we mentioned, like we spoke a lot in the kind of season preview that we did, the prediction show for the channel. Benjamin Negrin, I think, was the one from pre-season. You were like, right, he looks to be a snap already. What, 1.5 million? I was quite surprised when I saw the lineup. There was a few surprises with the lineup as we'll get into, but he was the one I was like, I get he's been playing kind of inside. He looks to be more of a kind of wide forward than a winger, or a wide midfielder than a winger. But he looked a bit disjointed. Now I'm not, again, that'll come, but as I was probably more fascinated with that than I was with anything, because I don't think he was brought in to be part of a midfield three.
I think he seemed like the obvious replacement for Kuhn. And again,
Yeah,
that looks like smart. Again, picking up somebody for a relatively nominal fee for the fact that he's 24, he's a full international for Sweden. But obviously, when you see where he's been played, he's not even had any minutes at all. I don't think in pre-season wide, he was always kind of for that number 8. I think he's got the skill set for it. I think he spoke a wee bit about it before the game in terms of he was asked Rodgers why, Nygren over Engels a bit. He went a bit about, it's that how he operates in tight spaces. I think that's been Engels' issue, is that he's maybe not so fluid in those areas. His skill set seems to be better suited, and maybe that's a missed profile to some extent. But his skill set seems better suited longer passes from deeper set pieces. We know his quality there. Whereas obviously, St Mirren, are going to play deep 9 times out of 10 domestic opponents that come to Celtic Park are going to do that. So somebody like Nygren, who can take on the half turn, looks a bit more kind of comfortable in those areas. I can see why he went for him in there, and he was fine. I don't think he was, I think maybe if he puts that one away at the front post, keeper, George makes good save up onto the bar, then that kind of changes the narrative a wee bit, I suppose. But I thought he was fine. I think those 2 8s, you're going to have him. Obviously, McKeown makes an impact to win the game as well. You've got Bernardo sitting there too. So I think you're going to see plenty of rotation in there. Whether
I think
one of those
midfield's a
goes
one
out.
area. I think midfield's a one area. I'm like, I don't think there needs to be much done. Maybe
No,
a
not
holder.
unless anyone moves out.
Yeah.
I think potential, I think somebody like Paulo Bernardo is maybe thinking, how much game time am I going to get here now? We need to get in if he's now, that's his position, and he looks like he's favoured pretty early in the season. But I think having somebody like Nygren who seems more naturally, attacking minded in terms of, I think he's more a goal threat. I think what kind of wanted to see more from him or Hatate in those positions yesterday was just getting beyond a wee bit more,
Yeah.
trying to, really impact the final third. It seemed all a wee bit safe, a wee bit too getting in front of them. Would have hoped to see that a wee bit more, because you've seen that from him, in pre-season, getting into the box and getting on the end of things. I think hopefully that'll come as well. I think there's wee passes of play where he's maybe just not on the same wavelength as Hatate and McGregor, but again, that'll come. I think there's certainly other areas of the park that'll be more pressing in the next few weeks. But yeah, relatively quiet given what we've seen in pre-season. But I thought he was fine, and hopefully more to come from him.
You mentioned obviously other areas of the park. I wanted to touch on a few of those. We saw obviously Kieran Tierney at left back as we expected, and within minutes we saw the step up in class. Like, it's just, I thought him and Maeda were linking up pretty well early on. I think it'll take a bit of time to fully get on the wavelength. We spoke a lot on the kind of last show we did last season about what happens if the Tierney injury bug hits, which we know is a possibility, and we saw, although it was reported to be cramped, there's still that worry that Tierney can get hurt. Is Inamura the second choice? Do you still fancy Celtic to go for a left back? Because I think that's a massive risk, and I said it last year. I'm like, that's, if you're gonna, Kieran Tierney's first choice, we get that, but you need cover in there.
Yeah, probably not a good sign that he's not made the bench yesterday in Amura. I kind of understand his thinking about Rodgers. He said obviously he's comfortable moving Scales out there yesterday because in terms of the physicality that St Mirren offer. Yeah, I thought Scales was fine yesterday as well. First he was fine when he came on as well. Going to be interesting how that plays out in terms of Simpson Fusey coming in, whether that changes the dynamic there. He's not going to have to come up here, given he's got minutes at Man City to sit on the bench. He'll have to play some part. So yeah, that's interesting. But in terms of Tierney, in that left back situation. There have been links with left backs as well, and the way he's spoken about Inamura initially, straight out on loan now, I'm making my mind up on it. Doesn't make the bench yesterday, points to, I know there's plenty to do the next few weeks, but left back's probably going to be there somewhere on the list. Whether they get to it or not will remain to be seen. But I think I think a loan for Inamura and bringing another left back in would seem like something that would probably need to happen in the next few weeks. Certainly, if he's not made the bench yesterday, Scales is not second choice left back for Celtic. Hopefully, through the season, he's not there. If Tierney can't continue with Scales out there, it's not ideal. It's not suited to him either. He has played there before in his career, but it's not what where the resources the club have got where we should be thinking about that. But yeah, I would expect to see somebody come in there. And Tierney, I thought he's looked pretty strong during pre-season. I think he will just need to still be managed though. In terms of we're going to be going to 2 games a week for 50 odd games a season. He'll not have done that for a number of years. Given just maybe in terms of lack of game time, in terms of just not being picked at Arsenal, or not playing out or playing in Europe, maybe not playing in the Premier League, or being out at Real Sociedad and just playing in the league. So yeah, I think. But yeah, encouraging. I'll be fairly encouraging. Totally different in terms of from Taylor. In terms of taking that kind of a bit deeper, a bit wider. Hopefully, start to see a wee bit more with Maeda. I was trying to get him in over the top a few times. That's Maeda's strength. There's a few times he's probably, Maeda playing with his back to goal maybe a wee bit too much. That's not his strength. So, and obviously Hatai was pretty quiet on that left side as well. So I think that there's been signs in pre-season with on that left hand. If that was the starting left hand side for the rest of the season, you'd be fairly comfortable that you could put in and enjoy it at those 3. Depending again what happened, Maeda's potentially does he need to be used on the right? Does he need to be used in the middle? Is he still here? That's potentially. You will have Jota to come back in at some point. I know it seems up quite a way, but that's the left's obviously he's more comfortable over there as well. So the prospect of Tierney and Jota as well is quite, be nice to have that just now, but hopefully see that at some point in the season.
The right side of the front 3 was very interesting because we'll probably spend about 10 minutes on the person through the middle. I spent about an hour talking to somebody about it today at work, but I think it's very interesting. Yang was given the nod, and quite interesting because did okay last season. Certainly picked a bit up in terms of consistency, was adding goals to his game. I don't think we're ever going to follow his work rate. I was interested though because this time last month he looked to be very much in the way out the door to Norwich. So I'm not necessarily sure he's going to be here at the end of the window, but he's not the number 1 in that position.
No, certainly not starting. I think potentially even question marks over coming off the bench. If he was your 5th, 6th winger, fine. I don't think that would be happy for him. I think he obviously, if there's been links and he's maybe thinking, I'm not going to, what's the next step in his career? Yeah, probably going out somewhere. But, you've seen the reports that Marco Tilio's move isn't happening because they can't do a deal to bring another winger in. So Yang's in the same position because you can't let one of them go just now at the moment. Tilio was obviously.
We haven't seen enough of Tilio, but if you were Brendan Rodgers or you were part of the coaching staff, Yang or Tilio, who's
probably Yang, but not. It sounds really bad. It's not. I think Tilio's just not got the physicality. I think he's got quality. I think I remember watching him a bit before he came and doing kind of reports and stuff on him for Celtic Way and being relatively encouraged in terms of he's got that low centre of gravity. It's just the physicality in terms of not just the strength. I think just the pace of the game in Scotland's just not suited to him. He's just not showing he can adapt to that. So happens again. I see something. I don't think he's can't be a reasonable player somewhere in Europe and that kind of a tier or two below a club like Celtic. Yang as well, Norwich. Like you say, that's not too bad a club. Would be a not too bad
I
move
think
for him.
that's very much a Wata vibes where going to the kind of Championship, lower, like higher League One,
Yeah.
and just turn them round. Like,
So I think it'd be it's a numbers thing though. Palmer was clearly to be not part of the squad moving forward either. So Palmer, Yang, Tillio. After that, you're made on Forest. We draw it out, so you're down to 2-1 essentially. So I think just in terms of pre-season games, start of the season now, if you've not got those other players in, then these guys can't go out yet. So I don't. Probably, you're talking two wingers probably ideally before the end of the window. Even if they do come in, so Yang might still have to be a part of the squad in terms of that fifth, sixth choice, especially with Jota still being out, especially James Forrest. He made a good impact yesterday, but he's not going to be right. You can't rely upon him at the age he's at now to be starting games week in week out. Or
I thought he was excellent when he came on. I thought
Yeah, he's good as well. I think he's a fourth, fifth, maybe winger. Yeah, I think he's still got something to offer, but if he's used, limited his minutes and used when needed, fine. But yeah, and Yang, I think like we've seen flashes before. I've seen flashes and been encouraged and said, yeah, there's and he's stuck with him. All those players that were brought in that summer under in the first season, pretty much every one of them's gone now. But Yang and Bernardo, the only two. So he's seen something, Rodgers, but I don't. I think we've probably reached the point now that it's not going to be a Celtic. So whether that's January next summer, if it's a numbers thing. But certainly that right hand side, whether that is somebody can be brought in on the left and can you use Dyson on the right. I don't know, but yeah, I thought again, given something a wee bit of credit for yesterday is always well organised. I think Declan John, the left back, left wing back, didn't get any joy at all. Yeah, I didn't see him go around him once. I think he's a decent SPFL Premiership fullback, but a Celtic winger needs to be getting a better a player of that quality, even if he is decent for the level. And he come inside a few times. Just yeah. I think Johnson, had to do a lot to get in and out of that right hand side. I think
you can tell he misses that. You can tell he missed that link.
Yeah, there's a few times he's kind of looking for Yang to maybe make that, like Kuhn did, those kind of diagonal runs, in behind, just wasn't there. So yeah, I think it's probably just it's just what needs to be done just now in terms of Tillio's obviously further out the door in terms of it looks like there's a deal agreed. So if it's between him and Yang for next week again, if things still haven't finalised whether that's Celtic bring somebody else in, then I think it'd be Yang again for the interim anyway.
I want to throw a few stats at you, right? And people will get where I'm going here because this will sound a bit. If you're not into stats and you're not into like XG, then you're probably going to turn the show off. Please don't. But I'm just going to run a few stats here just on Adam Ida. 4 shots, 7 out of 11 accurate passes, XG of 0.7. Shots on target 2 out of 4, 50%. Big chances missed 3. Offsides 3. Ground duels 1 out of 5. Aerial duels 2 out of 2. Non-penalty XG 0.70. And probably the one I'm most fascinated with, touches in opposition box 8.
Yeah,
with
them? It's such a hard one because I think the fee. I think even if the fee had been a wee bit less, he's very much a £3-4 million striker. I think that's.
Is that the main thing, or the fact they haven't replaced Kyogo, and he's by default the number one choice.
Yeah, I think so. I think what was it, 20 goals last season when he probably wasn't starting a lot. It's fine. I think for me, it's always been about what else he brings to the game. Rodgers has always been, talked about, centre forwards, setting the game and being a focal point and all that kind of thing. Just don't see enough the rest of his game and that aspect either. Like say the offside thing yesterday is frustrating. That's just kind of the ages it now, how much professional football he's played. That those kind of things are frustrating. But if you can put one or two of those chances away, it just keeps keeps that narrative at bay a bit. The one that off the post, he's going for far too much power there. He's got just a bit of composure there to go back across the keeper and find the other side of the net. I think one of my biggest criticisms at times has probably been just on his heels a bit too much, just not enough conviction in terms of going and getting on the end of things. The header from Tierney's cross in the first half, a few times when it's come in, and was just not quite there in terms of on his toes. And I think I can understand why Rodgers started. I think it would have been a huge red flag if Yamada or Kenny had started yesterday. I think he had to go with him. I think he has to stick with him until somebody else comes in. Yamada,
I'm very interested what you said there. Will Celtic sign a striker between now and September the 1st?
I think so. I think I have to. I think given that there's chat with Kenny going out, whether that even be permanent, I think Osman is development in terms of it's a loan for him as well. I think he's not a sell, he's just coming in and loan, but it's a loan for him. And it's probably at the stage now with Kenny that you can see that's a similar vein to Yang. It's a player that's probably going to have a pretty decent career, but I just don't think he's quite at the.
When Jim Cam coming on for Yamada though, because I was interested in that.
Yeah, people probably read too much into it. I add that to Anamura not being on the bench, Osman not being on the bench. I suppose Doohan was always going to come in as that Bain replacement as per choice, but that's pretty much a chunk of summer recruitment work, not making the match day squad. And obviously then, like you say, it's Yamada who's left on the bench for Kenny. I probably wouldn't read too much into it, but I think, because he's still an unknown quantity as well, Yamada, Rodgers and the coaching staff have seen plenty of them training in a few weeks, so I say obviously made the call that Kenny was the better shout, then fine. But I think there's a chance that ideally that's what would kind of happen with Kenny and Osman to go out. Where Kenny's now just a permanent. I think there's been chat about permanent, and then you bring in ideally somebody of a quality who's going to be able to lead that line, and then you've got Ida and Yamada there. So that'd be a three ideally, but and I don't think again that's too much to like come back to what we said there. I'll say that in terms of the knowing Kyogo was going for a long time, and still seem to be in a position where we're not replaced that. And even in terms, we've replaced it in terms of numbers. If you say brought in two other strikers, but not anywhere near the kind of the level of quality.
There was a brilliant thing yesterday. I don't know if you see it. It was just after. I think it was just after he hit the post, and this must have been on purpose. It came up an advertisement for Birmingham against Ipswich, and Ian Crocker just shouted Kyogo, and you could literally hear Chris Sutton's teeth chittering. Like, is Adamida unfair? Is it the price tag? Is it £9 million? I thought the goal return last season was okay, 20 from 53. It's just though.
It's Rodgers as well. He's not. He obviously wanted whether there's been plenty rumour discussion about Why did they wait so long last summer to do that deal? Did they think they were going to get him a bit cheaper? They ended up paying well beyond what should have probably been paid. I was always because last summer I'd kind of done that recruitment plan and looked at it, and that, I was keen. I didn't see much between him and Hull in terms of just the numbers or just on the eye. Um, to warrant, getting 3-4 million, I think, for all and spending X amount to bring you back. So when they had Kyogo and Ida for the first 6 months last season, more often than not, it was Kyogo that's preferred in certainly the bigger games. Kyogo leaves in January, and Ida starts getting played through the middle in those bigger games. So I think that kind of comes back to what I said. I think you have to stick with him yesterday. I think he probably needs to stick with him just now until somebody else is brought in. But I think Rodgers knows himself, and he's not doing enough or he's not seeing enough. And like I say, you do see, well, he was on loan, but he was only bought last summer. Is that, you know, is it that, is it one in, one out for him? He goes out and somebody else comes in? I'd be a bit surprised with that. Like I say, I think it needs to be that 3. And as long as, there's somebody brought in who can at least look like he's going to, have the quality to be, number one striker, and either plays a part off the bench or starts occasionally. You've got your Yamada there as well to push and see what he can do. But it's hard to make a case for him just now, based on what we've seen so far, being what a lot of people thought he would be in terms of once Kyogo leaves, he's a Celtic number 9. He's going to play week in, week out. He's going to score your 30 goals, and it's hard to see that now. I think there's been too much negativity around him already, probably. So I don't know whether maybe it's next summer, depending who comes in, depending how the season goes, where, maybe they have to just, accept that, on paper, the fact, he's Irish international, he's come in and done well on loan. I think it was an expectation everyone wants it to succeed, but I think if he was, brought in for £3-4 million, there wasn't, there's a whole baggage going back to the fact that, he was a loan signing at the last minute that nobody seemed to know anything about, or he wasn't getting a kit looking at Norwich. If there wasn't all of that, if he was just a £3-4 million player from, somewhere in Europe, league in Europe, you'd go, nah, he's done okay, maybe keep on to see. But I think because of all those other things, it just heightens that, narrative round about him, and maybe it's just not going to work out.
And I don't think it was, again, it probably was helped by the fact that he came up trumps in the cup final. Like,
yeah,
I think it is a price tag. And a lot of people at the time when he did well when he came in loan initially, it was, he's a different type of player to Kyogo in terms of striker, and he's more suited to what Rodgers wants from his number 9. We remember like Dembele, Edward. They were very different types of players to like Griffiths, for example. And even at Leicester, he seemed to go for that kind of big physical striker that would be the opposite of what Vardy was.
Mm.
But the problem is as well, you do need the Vardy and the Griffiths type to get you those numbers.
Yeah, you need that mix. So, and it'll be interesting. Hopefully, we can really hope there's another centre forward going to be brought in the next couple of weeks. It'll be really interesting to see the profile of that striker, because Yamada looks like a kind of powerful runner.
It's faster than Maeda, apparently. That's all we're hearing.
He certainly looks like he's got something about him. I don't think it's, in isolation, a bad kind of bit of business to bring in somebody from, obviously had a really kind of poor goal return last season, but the season before he's one of the most perfect strikers in Japan. And he certainly looks like he's got some good physical attributes. So, what is that kind of third? Because Chris Garden, if he was to be played at centre forward, and he's a very different profile to either of those players. He's more kind of smaller, low centre gravity, kind of more could create more in terms of dropping deeper. And things like that. Can I be more kind of working in the kind of half spaces, stuff like that, rather than being that total focal point. So, yeah, be interested to see that kind of profile. I hopefully see somebody though.
We've just seen Lauren Shanklin score. Is he maybe the answer?
I
You do
think
need that, though. You do need that. That's one of the things, obviously, that you look at the other side of the city as well, where I think this kind of striker conundrum is there as well. They don't really have that 20 goals. I mean, the highest goals, I mean, Cyril Dessers scored 18 goals last season, was enough for top goal scorer. Like, I don't think there's a lot of that kind of penalty box instinct. I think Ida does have it. It's just, does he have the rest? Is he going to be consistent? Like we mentioned about the XG, like 0.7 XG, you have to be scoring one. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and especially in a game like that where Celtic were getting so many shots away, it was just felt as if. I don't think the Maeda number 9 thing is going to. I think with the problem you've got obviously with the left side, if Jota was fit, yes, I could see that. Maeda, I think, is way too important, and especially in bigger games, to be playing through the middle. I don't think you're going to have that unless you have Woods. But I wanted to kind of close on just that kind of that player, that kind of thing Rodgers said in terms of the comments in the press about club signings and looking very much like he was a bit not fed up, but I think there was we kind of saw that at the start of his third season in his last spell, where it was clear his targets and the club's targets were very different. I'm not going to say John McGinn but we know what that was about. Is there a bit of that? And with the kind of 6 years of a difference, like, should Brendan Rodgers know what was coming, or is that a kind of laziness from the club that we have this manager that we are so not lucky to have, but we're quite. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't imagine they thought 6 years ago when they were doing that he was going to come back and have a second spell.
I think
Is that a case of history repeating itself?
a wee bit, but like you said, they all know been down this road before. I think he's been more kind of flexible. I think you could give him his credit. I think he's what he has worked with what he's been given. I think last summer was largely similar in terms of that. The start of the kind of window is, just managing the squad a wee bit, looking at these like he said, like he said himself, these club signings, these guys that come in, we've got a top coach. Can you work with these ones? Can we, and it doesn't necessarily need to be always at Celtic. Can we, earn a profit on these guys I think as disastrous as that was 2 summers ago, we actually probably ended up with most of the money back. Some still on loan and wages, etc. Very little actual return, and it was costly in terms of it was about 9, 10, and they were all 2, 3 million. That still all adds up. I get that, but always seem to maximise value in terms of players going out. It's just this next part of the window where you get closer to the end, and whether the club has always there's always been that over quality Premier League sides finalise their squads. He's always kind of got an eye on that market. Certainly Rodgers, those players become available and then start becoming available now? Loan market as well, you might get that quality, and if it's somebody to cover, somebody like the situation you've got just now with Jota, those start to become available. I think it's just been that there seems to be a bit of and obviously what he said last week just kind of confirms that there looks like there's just that, whether there's been that kind of, I'm happy to work with some of the players you've got, but you've got to give me X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I need to push the boat here, and here. And to be fair to the club, and as everyone said last summer when the window shut, look like we've done that. Spent money on Ida, spent money on Engels, wanted another left 50 centre back, went and spent fairly big money for Celtic, 5, 6 million on Trusty. That's a reasonable outlay for Celtic. So I think there was probably that balance last summer. I think like we've kind of talked in terms of going into last year's deal, maybe there's a bit of apprehension from the club side of how far do we push at that side of things if we know he's not going to be here and we've got a manager come in 12 months who has a different idea or a different is looking for different profiles. So I think just that balancing act is probably tipping, I can see it from both sides, but I think that's probably where we're at in terms of that. And even if my kind of my call would be, even if we do make some big signings or relatively, but we do spend money, I don't think it's going to be a huge amount. I don't think it's probably going to be enough for him to stay beyond the end of the season. I think, and to go 3 years at Celtic has been a kind of average. It's been maybe that is about right, and this will be his 6th season, 5 and a bit. If he stayed to the end,
5 3/4.
5 3/4. So it would maybe just be natural that the 3 years is fine, and we ideally have an early title win and have another decent crack at Champions League. I think fans' worry would be what is next. Is that because the thing with Rodgers is there's that connection, which is why you can get a coach of that quality. And not to say that he's perfect or what is on the pitch is always the best thing ever, but it's been fairly successful. You can't argue with that. And when it's been good, it's been really good to watch. And last season, that first 6 months especially was how many times did people discuss probably as good as it was under Ange, if not better. You got that progress in Europe. He's definitely a better coach in that kind of environment. You feel, so where would the club go next is probably what kind of concerns fans most. That if they could agree, and if, like I said, what is his next move? Does he fancy the Premier League again, or does he? He said before he's comfortable here. His family, they're settled again. Could they come to some arrangement that they said, look, we are going to keep pushing it this way to give, to try and be as successful as we can in Europe as well. We'll still have this model as well, but that could still happen. But just at the moment, next few weeks I'll kind of tell you, I think, everything. But at the moment it doesn't seem likely. But hopefully it would be as another runner-up title in the bag.
Okay, folks, that will do us for this week's episode of the Celtic Report. We will be back next week to take a look at a tough trip to Pittodrie and preview what's coming up in terms of Champions League. Mate, thoroughly enjoyed that as always. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me on again.
Thank you very much. And for more Celtic content, follow us on our Celtic Report channel, and we'll see you all soon.